Welcome to the Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I'm Brad Bannon. I'm a national Democratic and progressive strategist, a political analyst for News Radio KNX in Los Angeles, and a weekly contributor to The Hill in Washington, D.C. If you want to get my take on Donald Trump's imperial presidency, you can read my contributions in The Hill at muckrack.com/Brad Bannon. Mondays on Deadline DC, I talk to the people and to the players behind the politics and policies that drive our nation forward or at least keep it from going backwards during Trump 2.0. This Monday, we have a great show. We have two guests for the press. Our guests are the authors of Flight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. We have Jonathan Allen, who is a senior national politics reporter for NBC News, and Amie, Parnes, senior political correspondent for The Hill. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. I know you're probably busy with your day jobs and your book tour, but it's great to have you on. Let me start with this. The book starts with that fateful evening in June of last year when Donald Trump debated Joe Biden. At the time, I seem to remember that the race was close. Donald Trump had a slight lead. But during the course of the debate, Joe Biden faltered. He seemed to lose concentration. He stammered through a couple of answers. And I remember I was sitting watching the debate with some friends, all fellow Democrats, and we all gasped. It was pretty horrible. What was behind all? Tell us the backstory behind all that. Amie?
Yeah, so I think you weren't the only one who guessed. I mean, we take you inside the Democratic universe. We purposely opened the book with Nancy Pelosi in her living room watching the debate. She can't believe it. She's talking to people and hearing from donors and lawmakers and other folks who are also shocked. James Clyburn pours himself a drink watching the debate. So we do a 360 of what is happening inside and outside, at the debate, and actually Democrats watching the debate. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, that is the moment that begins, obviously, the dynamic of trying to get Joe Biden to leave the race. And we kind of let it unfold from there.
Okay, John, in the book you discussed that, you mentioned the fact that when he ran and beat Donald Trump in 2020, he used to say something to the effect, "I'm bridge to a next generation of Democrats." And that suggests that there might be some question about him running for re-election. He did obviously decide to run for re-election. And why? He was obviously having problems. You mentioned in the book there were problems. His aides noticed his slowing up. What happened? Why did he continue to run for president?
Brad, it's a great question. I think it's answered most simply by something that Mike Donilon, one of his senior aides, said to a prominent Democrat who spoke to us for this book. And what Donilon said to this person was, nobody gives up the plane or the helicopter or the house. Biden believed that he was the only person that could beat Trump. He had spent most of his life seeking the presidency. He finally had it in his hands. He believed that he had done a good job as president and that the American people would see that and reward it. And I think what's most telling, Brad, is that when we talk to our sources close to Biden and close to this decision, there was not a discussion really of whether he would run for re-election, but more of when and how he would announce it, how he would campaign for it. The only people who really presented him anything close to an alternative view, according to our reporting, were Anita Dunn, who was his longtime communications advisor, and Bob Bauer, her husband, who was Biden's personal lawyer. And they sort of laid out for Biden what the ugly parts of a campaign would look like, including delving into the investigation into Biden's retention of classified documents, including delving into Hunter Biden's legal problems, but they didn't tell him not to run. They just said, it's going to be here. Here are some of the tough things that you're going to encounter. So, you're right. He did say to people that he would be a bridge to a next generation. I think there were a lot of implicit things that he said, or a lot of things he said that implicitly suggested he would serve just one term. I think a lot of Americans thought that that would be the case, that he was basically going to, sort of be a little bit of a bulwark against the sort of chaos of Trump's first term, come in and sort of handle the country with a smooth hand, and then give it up. And he absolutely had no intention of doing that at any time.
Okay. Amie, I wanted to describe what happened in the immediate aftermath of the debate. Phones were ringing, texts were clicking. What happened next?
Yeah, so I mean, the Democratic universe essentially imploded, and donors started. There was a massive freak out among donors. The campaign tried to appease them, get them on multiple calls that week, to say that everything's okay. The polls haven't really moved at all, but donors were getting really annoyed. I mean, they couldn't unsee what they saw on the debate stage, and so they started to withhold money. And at the same time, Nancy Pelosi and other leaders are hearing from lawmakers that are saying, I'm really nervous about how this is going to affect my race, in my district. And so you start hearing more of that throughout. I mean, we detail in the book all of these conversations that are being had. And then at the same time, Joe Biden's people are getting really nervous, and they're threatening, they're kind of undermining their own vice president and partner on the ticket, and saying, look, if you get rid of Joe Biden, you're going to be left with Kamala Harris. And then at the same time, Brad, you're having, a lot of people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama are bouncing they're trying to decide if they should, like, they're entertaining the possibility of an open convention, an open primary. And so they're having those conversations. And so all of this is happening at one time. It's a very long several weeks, as you might recall. What we do in the book is take you inside these conversations that are happening. We all saw what was playing out, but I think what John and I tried to do best is to really put you in the room for all of the conversations and the backroom conversations that are being had.
One of the things the book reminded me of is, and you mentioned it, the reaction of the donors to the failed debate, of how much time and effort the candidates and the campaign spend just raising the money. I mean, we're talking about billion-dollar enterprises here, and it's amazing how influential donors are, especially in this case you're describing, and just in general, the amount of time the candidates and their organizations spend raising money. What was the final spending total in the presidential race? Do you know?
I don't know what the overall total was. The Harris campaign, that side of it basically came in at about $2 billion, a little over $2 billion. I have to go back. The Trump campaign was a little bit less than that. Obviously, there are outside groups that contribute as well. So when you say billion-dollar campaigns, we're really talking about multi-billion-dollar campaigns, Brad. And to your point about the donors, I mean, if you're raising money, and this is where the rubber really met the road, in a lot of ways. In order to have a successful campaign, they thought you would have to have a big super PAC, and the donors to the main Biden super PAC were the ones that were freezing, money first and foremost, choking off a group called Future Forward. In addition to that, as Amie and I report, there were, donor, bundler types, basically, got people who raise money from other people for the campaign, who told the Biden aides directly, there's no point in trying to schedule fundraising events because we can't fill a room with people to just write you the maximum donation check of a few $1,000s.
Okay, we're going to have to take a short break now. We'll be back after this very short break for our radio listeners. We will continue the interview with our viewers on Facebook and YouTube. Our guests are Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes, the authors of a great new book called Fight, The Wildest Battle for the White House. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guests in this hour are Jonathan Allen from NBC News and Amie Parnes from The Hill, who are the authors of a great new #1 bestseller, Fight, The Wildest Battle for the White House. In the aftermath of the Biden debate debacle, there were two questions. First, will Joe Biden continue in the race? And if he doesn't, who will replace him? Let's take the first part. What kind of pressure was Joe Biden under right after the debate to step aside, and who was exerting the pressure?
I mean, he was under a lot of pressure. And you might recall it was a very strange week, the week that followed, Brad, because it was the 4th of July week. And a lot of people were kind of upset at him for not really coming out strong and defending his performance. And then he waits until the week after to really punch back. You know, he writes a letter to members of Congress, and he starts to get his bearings. And then Nancy Pelosi goes on Morning Joe a couple of days later and says that Joe Biden has a decision to make. And he's already said that he has made his decision, but she essentially is trying to force his hand. And what we do in the book is we detail what exactly is happening with Nancy Pelosi, what conversations she's having. She has at least two with Barack Obama, as we report for the first time in this book. She is trying to hear from people who are unhappy with what is happening. Barack Obama, at the same time, he's silent publicly. He's entertaining the idea of an open primary. And so we take you inside all of these conversations to reveal what was happening in these days.
And it's pretty clear that Joe Biden didn't want to get out. He eventually did under a lot of pressure. What finally convinced him to step aside?
Yeah, Brad, as Amie was saying, I mean, the president made very clear his intention to stay in the race. But in the final few days, a couple things happen. Number one, he gets COVID, and it's a lot worse than people think that it is. I mean, it's mentioned that he gets COVID. He's going to go home from a trip to Las Vegas. He goes to his house in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Um, People are masked inside because of his COVID. He's got respiratory problems, so he's pretty physically worn down. At the same time, he's had recent conversations with some of the top people on his campaign, including Rufus Gifford, who's basically the fundraising director. And Gifford tells him, "Look, the money's dried up. I think it'll come back, but I'm not sure when." He talks at his house to Mike Donnell and Steve Ricchetti, his two top White House aides, and they kind of lay out for him, the sort of bleak numbers that he's looking at. And they don't tell him he can't win, but they tell him that the numbers are tough. They tell him, what they've heard from other people, and
We're going to have to take another quick break. Sorry to interrupt you. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and our guest, Jonathan Allen from NBC News and Amie Parnes Hill, talking about their new book, Fight. Welcome back to our radio listeners. This is Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I want to remind our radio listeners that you can watch us as well as listen to us at facebook.com/ Deadline DC with Brad Bannon /videos, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@Deadline DC. Once Joe Biden decided to get out of the race, it was not a done deal, and that's one of the most interesting parts of the book, I think. It was not a done deal that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, was going to be the Democratic nominee. She was right there. She was next in line, but there was a fair amount of opposition to her taking the reins. Can you talk about that and who was behind that skepticism about her candidacy?
Yeah, I mean, right away, Nancy Pelosi tells the confidant, if he goes, she goes, meaning if Joe Biden goes, Kamala Harris goes. There was doubt about her. Barack Obama had the same doubts. I think that's why both of them were trying to offer up an alternative. They thought that maybe the open primary was the way to go. And so there was this urgency on her part and her team's part to kind of seal the deal and sew it up and get the support that she needs behind her. And so even in the hours before, and we report this for the first time in the book, in the hours leading up to it, she and her advisors rather are meeting in her pool house at the Naval Observatory in Washington and going over the plan for what would happen if he dropped out. And when he does announce that he's dropped out, he is dropping out, this meeting is going on in the pool house. And so they're prepared and ready to go with what she needs to do. And so I think that's sort of they knew what they had to do, and they got they galvanized support, got everyone on board, and sprung into action. She knew, and we detail for the book in the first time, that she had to get Joe Biden's endorsement right away. And when they get on the phone with one another and she realizes he isn't endorsing her, she pushes him for the endorsement right away.
Now, what was the nature of the hesitancy about elevating the vice president to the top spot to become the Democratic nominee? Some people were clearly skeptical of her potential candidacy.
You know, it's interesting, Brad. It's and this has enraged some of the readers in terms of what they're finding out for the first time. But the hesitancy on Joe Biden's part, you know, he says to her, she says to him, "Are you going to endorse me?" And he says, "You've got my support, kid." And she knows that's not an endorsement. If she doesn't hear the E word back, it's basically the F word. But it's not about him thinking that she's not going to be very good. He already told, or at least his aides already told everyone that would listen that they didn't think she was that great. And yet, the reason that he doesn't want to endorse her is it's an immediacy thing. He doesn't want to sort of block out his own spotlight. He wants to get out of the race, and then as he tells her, he says, "Look, maybe 3 or 4 days from now, I'll endorse you." And of course, she's got this immediate need to like wrap up these votes. And what he is caring about at that moment is he wants to get out and then take a little bit of a victory lap, bask in this idea that he is magnanimously giving up his candidacy. As we heard him later do, he compares himself to George Washington, giving up power voluntarily. Now, technically, I guess it was voluntary, but in reality, it was under tremendous duress.
And why? And remember, there's 100 days now before Election Day. I can certainly understand Harris did not want him to take his time. You know, this is my observation, and please react to it. I think it was amazing that she was able to put together a presidential campaign in, what was it, 100 days or whatever.
Yeah.
It seems to me starting a campaign that late is and trying to organize it is just a Herculean task. You know, I'm thinking of states where I've worked that have late September primaries, and you're in a bitter primary, and then all of a sudden you have to turn around and run against somebody else. and organize your campaign accordingly in a very short period of time. And I kept thinking, how can you do that, possibly do that in a presidential race? First of all, you want to leave yourself some time to make mistakes and correct them down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good observation, Brad, and I think that's why she really felt the need to, she had to jump in. She knew what she had to do. And she inherited a lot of his staff, and there was some tension related to that we detail in the book for the first time, because she wants to bring in her own people, but there isn't that much time to do that. So her staff is essentially left to operate in one room, and she's forced to keep on Jen O'Malley Dillon. They have a conversation, but I think she would have run a different campaign had she had more time, obviously.
And Amie, I just want to add, I won't say because it's a family show what the name of that chapter is about all of that intensity, but it rhymes with muckery and it starts with an F.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. What was the nature of, I mean, for instance, Nancy Pelosi and I think Barack Obama, that's a sense I got from your book, were both hesitant about Harris. What was the nature of that hesitancy?
It's there are a few reasons for it, but the big one is they didn't think that she would win. They didn't think she would be good enough. And in Pelosi's case, they're both from the San Francisco Bay Area. She's watched Kamala Harris in politics for a long time, and they are not friends. They do not get along well, and so I think that had a little bit to do with it. But I think also just the observation of Harris's abilities. I think also though that if you watch this race, Kamala Harris performed much better than Barack Obama or Nancy Pelosi or many of the other critics of Kamala Harris would have predicted. I think she performed better than Joe Biden would have had he stayed in the race. And she definitely had some flaws as a candidate. Some of those might have been correctable over more time, but I think what we found is actually she was, had the election ended earlier, she might have done even better. That at the end she was losing ground, losing steam. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We could discuss them, but the short answer to your question is that Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi had no faith in Kamala Harris.
Okay, we're going to have to go to another break very quickly. My guests today on the show are Amie Parnes of The Hill and Jonathan Allen from NBC News to talk about their great new best-selling book, Fight, The Wildest Battle, Inside the Wildest Battle to the White House. We're going to go to break now. But we'll come back with more on Amie and John and talk about somebody we haven't talked about much, but should, Donald Trump, we get back from this break. And the question I'm going to ask of both of you is, what is Donald Trump's secret to success? Okay. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guests in this hour are Jonathan Allen, national senior politics reporter for NBC News, and Amie Parnes, senior political correspondent for The Hill. Now, the sense I get from the book is that Republicans were united behind Donald Trump. You had roughly 20 or 25% vote against him in the Republican primaries, but pretty much he had a stranglehold on his party. On the other hand, the sense I get from your book is the Democratic Party is a party of factions. There's an Obama faction, a Pelosi faction, a progressive faction, and it seems to me, if you can look back on presidential races, the history of presidential races, the party that's united wins. The party is divided, goes home a loser. But let's start with the first part of the equation. it is amazing to me, Donald Trump, his, his capacity to survive disaster. I mean, here you have a guy who, since his last presidency, was associated with a failed coup to stop Joe Biden's election. He was found liable for a sexual assault in the E. Jean Carroll case, and then he was convicted of 34 counts of felony business fraud. And he ends up becoming president of the United States. What is his secret?
I mean, he didn't get the name Teflon Don for a reason. Um, I think that, this time he ran a much more disciplined campaign, and we talk about that a great deal in this book. Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita. And there's a moment, they're running the campaign, and there's a moment where he can, and we detail this for the first time in the book, he has a meeting with his campaign staff, his top officials, right on the heels of Kamala Harris taking the reins of the campaign. And he can either choose to carry on with Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, or bring in these characters from his past, like Corey Lewandowski. And there's a moment we detail in the book where they're on the plane, and he can make this decision. He can actually get rid of Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, and he chooses the stability route instead of instability, which is not very, it's not like him. And so I think, when you look at what happened on the Democratic side and what happened on the Republican side, there was a lot more stability this time, under the direction of those two people I just mentioned.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask you another question about. I wanted to ask this question in the first half hour, but I didn't get around to it. Uh, you talk in the book about Joe Biden's mental and physical decline. And I guess one of the questions, we're back. Oh, welcome back to our radio audience. This is Deadline DC with Brad Bannon, and our guests are Amie Parnes, who from the Hill, and Jonathan Allen from NBC News to talk about their great new best-selling book published by William Morrow, Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. Let me try this. In fact, I think someone talked about it at the White House Correspondents' dinner Saturday night. Did the press as a whole fail to notice Joe Biden's decline?
No, but at the same time, it's not on me and Amie to do a mea culpa for the entire media. Amie and I wrote a book in 2020 called "Lucky: How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency." I think. Oh, thank you for having it. I think a lot of Democrats ignored the warning signs in 2020. That both the political warning signs and a little bit of at least Joe Biden's age. We reported in that book that his aides stopped scheduling events at night. We saw things on the campaign trail that saw him looking and feeling a little older, and certainly having lost something off of his fastball. But I know that Amie and I both, in our daily reporting for our respective news outlets, did a lot of work to try to get information on the state of Joe Biden's physical and mental condition over the course of 4 years, because we could see, like many other people, that he was declining. You could see it on television. You could see it, for folks that were close to him. You could see it. But what we got was a lot of stonewalling from the White House, and a lot of intimidation from the White House in terms of trying to report those stories, and very little access to the president himself. And so I think there was a cocoon around him that drew tighter and tighter over time. I don't think his decline was linear. I think there were days that were better, and we report on this in the book, days that were better, days that were worse, weeks that were better, weeks that were worse. But look, I think the decline is something that was not reported on enough. But I don't look at the entire press corps and say, well, nobody out there was digging. Nobody out there was trying to figure it out, because I know Amie and I certainly were. And I know both of us wrote stories about elements of the decline over time, and suffered the backlash of the angry White House officials and others in the Democratic
Yeah,
Party.
and also, Brad, I think that at this point, someone needs to come out, either Joe Biden or someone else around him, and explain exactly what was going on. Because I think even a lot of Democratic voters, after they read our book, they have questions, and they need to address these questions.
Okay. Let me ask you about this. One of the things that you emphasized in the book was the lack of distance between Kamala Harris's positions and Joe Biden's. You referred to something, I think there should be no space between us. And I guess my question is, why, if looking at the polls, Joe Biden was not popular? I think to a lot of people, Donald Trump represented change. And why didn't Kamala Harris do more to create some distance between her and President Biden? There's that episode you talk about in the book where she was on, I think, The View, and they asked her what the host asked her about the differences between her and Biden's approach, and she said no space whatsoever, or something to that effect. What were the pressures on her that forbade her or prevented her from creating some much needed distance between her and Joe Biden?
I think in some ways, they had an agreement, obviously, between the two of them, the two principals, that they would stick together, that there would be no daylight. I think their staffs, the White House staff and her staff, were under the impression that they could distance themselves as much as possible. But I think the View moment is very interesting because she had prepared for that moment. And her aides were frustrated that she didn't articulate what they had prepared, which is, that she was proud of the fact that, proud of their record, but, and she was supposed to pivot to the future and what she would do differently in the future. And she doesn't do that. So there's deep frustration. But I think, what we're talking about here is loyalty to the president. And when you think about, when you go back 4 years and think about what was happening around her selection, there were a lot of people who doubted the fact that she would be loyal. And in the end, she was a very loyal foot soldier to the president.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask you this question. There is already a lot of speculation about the 2008 presidential race. Donald Trump has hinted that he plans to run again. How he can do that constitutionally, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay in a Holiday Inn Express once. Uh, but let's start with the Democratic side. Uh, Kamala Harris is trying to make a decision now. She could run for governor of her native California in 2026. Or, and I don't think she can do both, but who do I know? What do I think? Or she could wait and run for president again in 2028. And the early polls show that she has a big lead over her potential Democratic opponents. But my guess is that's probably pretty much based on her superior name recognition. So, what do you all think is the future for Kamala Harris?
Well, I would hate to get out in front of her. She's speaking, I think, for the first time publicly this week. And it sounds like what she's talking about is the kind of stuff you'd be talking about if you were running for president, which is to say, in opposition to Donald Trump. Maybe she will run for governor. I think you're right that it is unlikely she runs for governor, then runs for president, because either she loses the governorship or she's a brand new governor. On the other hand, the only people that would be potentially angry at her for serving a year or two in a governor's race before becoming president would be California voters who would have just elected her. So maybe she'd be okay. Feel like California is going to go Democratic in whatever the next election is. Um, I don't know what the future is for her. I would not underestimate the value of that name recognition, because name recognition costs a lot of money for people who don't have it. And it is a huge advantage. It does not mean that she would win. I think, what she would have to do to be in a place to win a Democratic primary or to win a general election would be to come up with a vision for the future, which she did not do in this last election. As Amie was saying before, she did not present change in an election where most of the country thought the nation was on the wrong track. And she had some policy ideas, but they did not amount to a big vision for change. So if she were to come out in 2028 with a real plan for the Democrats that sounded good, perhaps she could win a nomination. If she can't do that, I think it would be real hard.
If she does run for president again, any sense of whether she learned some hard lessons based on her 2024 campaign? It seems to me that was one of the real problems with her getting in, becoming nominee. So she has so little time, and everybody makes mistakes at the beginning, but usually you have time to correct them, and she really did. So do you think she's learned any lessons from her 2024 race that would carry over to 2028?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why she's sort of taking her time right now, and we haven't seen that much of her. She's considering all of this. She's talking to a lot of close aides right now to figure out what happened, because she thinks that she's going to win, and we detail this in the book. She goes into election night thinking she's going to win. Tim Walz also thinks they're going to win, and they're shocked by the fact that they have lost. They felt like they went into it with a lot of enthusiasm. The polls were tipping toward them, and the excitement around the ticket. So I think she had a lot to learn coming out of it. She was obviously, and yeah, I think that she'll take that time now to decide.
And Brad, we have a whole book that she could, if she has a few minutes, could take some time to read. I think it's a good read. It's called "Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House," and I think there are lessons for the Democrats, for Kamala Harris, and other potential candidates, and lessons for the Republicans, because sometimes when you win, there are things you could have done better, and sometimes when you lose, you did some good stuff.
We're going to take another break here for our radio listeners. This is Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I, of course, am Brad Bannon. No one else would step up to take the job. My guests in this half hour are Amie Parnes from The Hill and Jonathan Allen from NBC News, who are here to talk about their great new best-selling book on the 2024 campaign, Fight. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guests in this half hour are the dynamic duo of Jonathan Allen from NBC News and Amie Parnes from The Hill to talk about their great new book on the 2024 presidential race, Fight. You can see it up here in the corner. And I urge you to get it because it's great. As I was telling them before we went on the air, it was like binge reading. Once I started, I didn't want to stop. And so get it. And if you haven't already, read their book on the 2020 campaign, Lucky, which is also a great book. And in the future, if you run it, if you sell two books together in those packages that authors do sometime, you can call the two books The Rise and Fall of Joe Biden. Anyway, let me ask you this. I want to ask you something topical. before the hour evaporates. And my topical question is on Wednesday, 2 days from now, Donald Trump will celebrate the 100th day of his second presidency. What's your take on his first part of the second term?
So he has obviously, he came in thinking that he had a mandate, and has been trying to rechange the government, Doge and all of that. Tariffs have been, I think, a big black stain, dark mark on his record because of the push-pull and, the markets want consistency, obviously. We haven't seen any consistency, and I think people voted for him because they thought that he would do better with the economy. The economy was the big issue in the election. And so far, voters seem displeased with the actions he's taken.
Okay. Jonathan, do you want to weigh in? We have a minute or so before we break.
Yeah, sure. I think, Brad, that I think whether you are a critic of the president or a fan of his, you would look at the last 100 days and say that the speed and scope with which he's tried to remake the relationship between the government and the citizenry are breathtaking. And for some people, that's very exciting, and for others, it's terrifying. We have not seen, uh, certainly recently, and I would think even if you're looking at historical parallels, any president who has so routinely tested the boundaries of his constitutional authority across a broad range of topics, and particularly at a time when the nation is not at war and when the economy is relatively stable.
Okay. It seems to me that he is truly a revolutionary president. He's trying to redo the entire relationship that's been established over the last 250 years between state, local government, and the public, which is revolutionary. It's funny, you said that he thinks he has a mandate. Joe Biden did too, and how did that work out for him? It seems to me in some ways Trump is making the same mistake that Biden did, is talking about the grand plans and forgetting about the price of groceries. But that's just me. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC right after this break. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I want to welcome back our radio listeners, especially if you want to watch the show as well as listen to it. You can watch it at facebook.com/Deadline DC with Brad Bannon /videos, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@Deadline DC, or on Twitter at twitter.com/Brad Bannon. Let's try this. I want to follow up my question about Harris. Who do you think are the other Democratic players to watch in terms of a 2028 presidential race? We've already talked about Kamala Harris. Who are some of the other likely possibilities?
It's a huge bench, I think. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and John and I just sat with him the other day. I think Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, AOC is making some headlines lately with her rallies and getting a lot of interest. Pete Buttigieg, I think there's going to be a lot of interest from a lot of different folks.
Josh Shapiro,
Shapiro,
the governor of Pennsylvania. I haven't heard his name a lot, but I'd be surprised if you don't hear a little bit at least. Ruben Gallego in Arizona, the new senator from there.
Okay. Now, trying to figure out what's going to happen in 28 on the Republican side is a little tricky. The president has says that, there are ways which he could design running for a third term. And again, I don't know how that is. We should get a constitutional scholar on the show. Maybe he or she can explain that to me. It's unclear to me. But let's say that Donald Trump doesn't run for re-election. Who do you think the big players are on the Republican side? I know they have Trump 2028 hats out now, and I saw Donald Trump wearing one the other day. Is that a sign?
Yeah, I would take him seriously. I don't know that he will find a way to do it. I don't know, but like Donald Trump wants power. We know he's run for president 3 times. He lost the presidency, came back to run for it again after having held it. We haven't seen that since uh, Cleveland Harrison Cleveland back in the 19th century. So I don't doubt for a minute that he wants to be president after January 20th, 2028. If he is not somebody who is running for president, I think you look first at the vice president, J.D. Vance, who has done everything he can to be close to the MAGA base, but I think it'll be a little more open than that. I don't think Ron DeSantis will ever give up his dream of wanting to be president. He's the governor of Florida. So I would look at the Republican governor's bench and look around and say, I don't know, maybe Brian Kemp from Georgia. There's certainly any number of Republican governors that would look at it, and maybe some senators. Maybe Ted Cruz wants to run again. Josh Hawley from Missouri, Tom Cotton from Arkansas.
Okay. Let me ask you this. What is your assessment of Donald Trump's, of the Democratic response to the first 100 days of Trump's presidency? It seems to me that, and this goes back to a point we talked about earlier, Trump has a cult following, which is strongly united behind him. I think there's some comfort among Americans for bringing back, the good, the 1950s. A lot of times when I see Donald Trump, I think of that show All in the Family and that song Archie Bunker sings at the beginning. When men were men, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. Okay, that's the last time I sing on the show, first and last time. And I don't think, my sense is that Democrats have been divided in their response. One group of Democrats, and I would guess that very much Bernie Sanders and AOC have honed on economic issues and as a way of reversing the financial decline of hard-pressed middle-class families. There are other Democrats who talk more about immigration and threats to democracy. Just generally, what do you think of the Democratic response, such as it is, to Donald Trump's first 100 days?
I mean, it's been all over the place, and I think that's what's frustrating a lot of Democrats right now, including people like Gavin Newsom. They want to see something different. They think that the AOC Bernie tour, for example, is a good thing, but there needs to be more than that. We saw in 2017 when Democrats were the party of the resistance, didn't really work so well in their favor. I mean, they did well in the midterms. But I don't think you can still just continue to be the party of the resistance. Elections are about the future. People want to hear that you have a plan. And right now, Democrats don't have a plan.
Okay. And, well, I should bring this up too. Nate Silver was on some show a couple of weeks ago, and they asked him, I think it might have been Morning Joe, asked him who he thought would be the Democratic nominee, and he said Alexandria Ocasio. Could you react to that? Is really an option?
I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know for sure. So I would hesitate to say no about anything. I would just say we're a long way away, and she, like all the other candidates, potential candidates, has a number of challenges. Hers not least of which, she's definitely not in her late 70s, but fairly young, and fairly liberal. And we would just watch a campaign in which Kamala Harris's, on the record positions were used against her pretty effectively by the Trump campaign. And so it'll be interesting to see whether Democrats decide, hey, we're going to go with somebody who has this sort of, you know, um, extreme for the party set of views and go fight on that ground, or perhaps fight on different ground.
Let me ask you this. Despite the fact he was a very unpopular president, and he clearly made some mistakes, I have a soft spot in my heart for Joe Biden. I can't help myself. And it seems to me that even though he's in disrepute right now, he may have a legacy down the line. Despite his failures, he got the United States involved in the fight against climate change. And although Trump's trying to reverse that, I'd like to think that if we win the fight against climate change, it will be because Joe Biden started the fight. It also seems to me his other legacy was trying to innovate the American economy, rebuilding infrastructure, tech innovation. Am I just being crazy here, or will Joe Biden historians treat Joe Biden better than current observers do?
It's a very tricky question, Brad, and I think we're still sorting that out right now. I do think that he didn't do himself any favors with his response to in the way in which he handled himself on the campaign and in the final days of his campaign. I think a lot of people in the party are blaming him right now for that.
Okay.
Yeah, Brad, I think similarly to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a lot of Democrats love Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they loved her for a long time, but they are still mad at
Yeah.
her for not knowing when to step aside. And I think that Biden will continue to have the appreciation of Democrats for the many things he did before not choosing to step aside, but for not choosing to opt out of a second term run in the first place, and then the way he handled himself after the debate, fighting tooth and nail to stay in. I don't think that's going to be helpful to his legacy.
Okay. I want to thank our guest today, Amie Parnes, Senior National Political Correspondent for The Hill, and Jonathan Allen, National Politics Reporter for NBC News. I also want to thank my intrepid executive producer, Mark Grimaldi, who makes sure the show runs on time and stays online. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Miss the next show at your own peril, or you'll never forgive yourself. I'm Brad Bannon signing off. We'll be back together before you know.